Welcome back to Uncovered. Today we are going to dive deep in this episode. We're going to talk about pole and pole identities. So
I'm so excited.
Today we have, you might know her from one of our previous episodes where we talked about clicks. We have Mon back on our podcast. Thanks, Mon, for joining us again.
No worries. Thanks for having me.
So when we spoke with Mon previously all about clicks, we did dive really deep. Some of our episodes obviously are a little bit about, fitness to do with pole, entrepreneurship, all sorts of topics. Today, we're going to talk about identity, and I feel like this relates to every pole dancer out there, and we're going to really just work on understanding what is identity, how it relates to pole, and some of the myths, I guess, with it, and I guess just learn about it.
Yeah, she's already said that this topic is so big, she's had to bring it on in, so I'm really excited.
I had to condense. I was getting too carried away.
But that goes to show there's so much to learn and so much behind it that you might not even think about. So do you want to get us started, like, what is identity?
I guess the simple answer to that is your identity is who you are.
Yeah.
Like, who am I? How do I fit into the world? And how do I portray myself?
Yeah.
So there's lots of different identities. There's, social identity. So you might identify with a certain ethnicity or social group or religion or nationality. And then you've got like what other things make up your identity. So the stories that you've been told from when you were really young, your personality traits, your beliefs, your values, what you're good at, what you don't feel like you're good at. So I guess the people who are able to really easily identify with those aspects of themselves, they're the people who have a really strong sense of identity. They tend to be people who are quite well settled and quite well adapted and kind of know who they are and have a really strong presence.
Can people feel like really strong in one sort of identity and not in another?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think people have multiple identities as well. Yeah. I have a work personality, which is very different from my own personality. And I think different friends and different relationships bring out different aspects of your identity as well. I was going to talk about this much later, but it's coming up already.
That's okay. Let it flow.
But I don't know. This is not a psychological term by any means, but have you heard the term revertigo? It's from an episode of How I Met Your Mother, and it refers to when you are around people that you knew from another lifetime or like when you were at school or at uni and when you hang out with them, you almost revert back to the person you were when you knew them, and they bring out those old aspects of your identity.
That's so interesting.
Yeah, it is a really interesting concept, and it's like I notice it happening with myself all the time when I hang out with old school friends that I haven't seen for years and things like that, and it goes to show, I guess, how much your identity can change and expand and grow. I've realised exactly that. Like the actual people in my lives could care less whether I'm a pole dancer or not.
Yeah. So would you say that that's then like some sort of like maladaptive thinking or behaviours? Like I guess it could be good or could be bad. Like unhelpful,
it's not. Thank you. Yeah, I think identity can be really helpful in certain ways, but it becomes unhelpful when you fuse with it and when it becomes rigid. So
and like you said, like your identities, and I guess that's can be tied with your values and all that sort of stuff, does change over time and can change. So what you thought like 5-10 years ago might not be what you think and feel now as well. So.
Yeah. And I think your identity really dictates your behaviors and how you like make choices in the world and how you live your life. So I think some people, their identity works really well for them. If you identify as the fit person, you're always going to make choices that are really fit and healthy and really work well towards that. But then I think there's also people that are maybe kind of use aspects of their identity to avoid growing. If you've ever met those people who just behave badly and then they're like, that's just who I'm just a bitch. That's just who I am. Like, all of a sudden they're giving themselves permission to behave badly and make bad choices, and they don't have to change because that's who they are. That's their identity.
Yeah. And you hear that so many with people with their like relationships and stuff. Like it's people are just like, well, that's the sort of person I am. Like this is me.
Love it or leave it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Where it's like actually growth is sexy, guys.
Yeah. And I think they're the kinds of people that will always eventually end up with those negative relationships or struggling to keep those bonds. Because in order to, I guess, grow and adjust, you need to be able to grow in your expanded world and be able to link in with those people around you. And if you're trapped by those aspects of your identity and you're allowing them to dictate bad behavior.
So how do you identify that, and how do you not let it dictate?
I think it just comes back to self-reflection. Like, growth is all about the ability to self-reflect and the ability to look at yourself, you know, on a really honest level, and listen to the feedback that you're getting from other people. If you have the same relationship over and over and over again, that's giving you the same feedback over and over again, there's probably a pattern of behavior there that, you know, you can look at and you can decide to change. It's really hard though. Yes. Shifting your identity can be really difficult. And
really, what's the word I'm looking for? Like humbling, I guess, in a way too. Because if you have stuck by these, you know, ideas or beliefs for so long and you're like, this is who and then all of a sudden you're kind of like, oh, I want to change
I don't want to be that way anymore.
I don't want to be that way. It's going to be hard because people can be nasty and people can judge, or you can feel like people are going to judge. But most of the time, people are like, oh, no, like, this is great. Like, I like you so much better as a person now. Like,
or you might find that those people don't grow with you and you form better and healthier relationships. Exactly. And I think there's people as well who are also trapped by identities that are placed on them at a really young age. Like, you see that a lot with, like, your career criminals. So people who are told, like, from a really young age that it's in your blood and there's nothing else for you. Or kids who are constantly told that they're the naughty child are always going to grow up thinking, I'm just naughty, so that's how I need to behave, you know. And you really, like, internalize those early messages that you get from a really young age. So you'll often find, like, in families, their parents will have the go-to child or the helpful child or the, you know, the child that always does what they're told, and then they've got the cheeky child or the naughty child, and as soon as you label it, they internalize that, and that becomes a really, I guess, core part of your identity. So those ones can be really hard to shift.
What I find interesting is, as we're talking about these identities, is so many people come into a studio and like, I can be myself here, like, this is a great place. So why is it that these environments are encouraging people to be themselves? Or I guess when we think about identity, be what they perceive as themselves. So what is it about an environment that can, like, create that?
Well, I think the pole environment, it's any creative environment, really. Okay. But pole in particular, I think, is just something so different. So people really use that as a way to explore new areas of themselves. And it's such a naturally sexy, controversial, you know, cheeky thing to do. If you're already going into that world, you've already got that in your mindset. So you're a part of a community that, you know, we don't take stick and don't tell us that pole's this and blah, 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 blah.
There's
so you've got that rally
what's
behind
the word
you.
for that? Is it instinctiveness? There's a theory that is exactly that. It's like as humans, we want to blend in, but as humans, we want to be unique. So that's why pole is so great.
I do know which word you're talking about. I remember you
I'm going to have to Google it. I think it's been brought up in a podcast episode, but I think what's so great, and I think when you say that, that's what comes to mind, because it's like, we're so different to everybody outside our bubble, but so we are different to everyone else. But when we're in that environment, we also encourage the differences within our studios. But it's like the world is just our enemy, so we're unique, but we're together as
nothing bonds you like having a common enemy. Not that the world is your enemy as a pole dancer, but I think if you come back to, like, what makes up identity, it's values, it's passions, it's abilities, it's personality traits. So when you walk into a pole studio, you're learning new skills. They're special skills that not everyone can do. You're part of a community of other people who are embracing different aspects of themselves. So there's very little judgment if you decide to do something new or different or sexy. Like, I even noticed it with myself. Like, when I started pole, all of a sudden my socials was I've always been a very confident person. But when I was a pole dancer, all of a sudden it's like I had this permission, like, you can post a naked photo on Instagram and people are like, oh, it's fine, she's a pole dancer, you know, like, she's a bit risque. And, like, even since I've stopped pole, I've really noticed, like, I second guess those photos now. And I'm like, wow. Should I, you know, I had this, like, photo that I took the other day and I was like, nah. And I've like never thought that before. Wow. Like, so I ended up just sending it to my husband and be like, someone needs to see this photo. He was like, you never send me photos like this, because he's not on Instagram, so he doesn't actually see any of
Oh, that's so funny.
more riskier photos. But yeah, and I all of a sudden, like, I don't identify that way anymore. So it's shifted and changed the choices and the behaviors that I make, even just in the social media world.
Yeah.
I know
it's really
we
interesting.
had that conversation before, hence why you're here talking to us about it today. But I was thinking about that this morning as I was preparing for this and reflecting on it myself. And it's like, when I started getting really confident in pole, that's when I started bringing out the stilettos in the workplace, and I started really presenting myself in a much more confident way. And that made a huge change. Initially, it was really hard because people are just like, you could tuck your shirt in for the first time ever into your skirt, and they'll notice it and be like, oh, your shirt's tucked in.
Oh, you're wearing that. Oh, you're wearing this dress. Or, yeah, I think something you said before, like when you're at the studio and people are encouraging you and going, yeah, like, girl, do it, and whatnot. It's like a lot of people don't have like a community like that anywhere else. Like, we come from school, and school can be a mean place as well, but where you have these like friendship groups, and then you don't necessarily, like, I do know a lot of people that the main people they talk to is the people at work, and then they have a family, but then it's like they don't have much outside of that. So this is something where it's like a lot of people in one spot, but really, really encouraging environment, and not judging and caring about what someone does at the end of the day. I think you just don't get that anywhere else.
I mean, we focus a lot on the pole community because that's our community that we're familiar with, but it happens in any community. Yeah. You know, it's interesting you were talking about soccer players before, because if you're a soccer player and you're part of your local soccer club and you go down to the soccer club every Friday for a barbecue, blah, 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 all of a sudden that's what builds your identity. That's what gives you confidence. That's what builds those relationships. That's what gives you purpose. It's all about, you know, whatever it is that you find that you can identify with and gives you some sense of self. Yep. It's a real strong sense of self. That's what people are really craving. And I think why pole gives you that so quickly is because, I mean, if you look at a lot of our target market, it is women who are searching for a sense of self, you know, who lack confidence or have mental health issues, or they're a mum and they've lost their identity from, you know, who they were before being a mum. So all of a sudden pole, it kind of reignites that sense of, I've got something now, you know, something that makes me and something that makes me special.
Yeah. I just love pole so much.
I know, it's like so warm.
I like all the warm and fuzzies have come out. But like my husband CrossFits, so he is a CrossFitter, and he's got a community there. He's built friends there. They go out for beers. They do like beach wads and all these things. So yeah, I agree.
Does he do beach wads?
Yeah, he does beach wads. He's doing one tomorrow. He's going to ride his bicycle down to Redlands, and they're going to do a beach wad. They do those things, and I think that's where studios do quite well, is because they are very community focused, generally speaking, and throwing all those little extra things that make them go, cool, like I get to be around other people, is really good. But yeah,
it's interesting when that gets taken away, though, what happens to your identity and your sense of self.
Oh yeah.
And your confidence as well.
So how do you then have an identity, I guess, in pole, but then also like, well, how do you have an identity in anything, but then not let it just rule you completely? Because I know that I've had a few friends who has had a close friend have like an accident and then in a wheelchair for the rest of his life, and he does a lot of motivational speaking, and he's been really great after it. But it's like, he was the fit person, he was the travel person, he was the active person, and like I've even thought about it, I'm like, what if that happens to me? Like I you know, live by being outdoors and moving, and like that is at the forefront of my mind. Like everything I do, I'm like, I want to have a body that I can move when I'm like 80 years old. So I'm like, what happens? How am I going to deal with that? So how do you do that? Have these strong identities in these things, but then also not rely on them, I guess.
Yeah, it's a really, I guess, interesting question. And I actually deal with this on a daily basis because I work in occupational rehab.
Perfect person for us to have on this podcast then.
Yeah. So I deal with workplace injuries mainly. But workplace injuries, they're the same. They impact every aspect of someone's life and their identity. And so much of it, is who am I now? And that loss of identity. And people do have like major depression when they lose major aspects of their identity. You'd see it a lot in pole as well for girls who get injured and can't pole anymore. I know I struggled with it. But yeah, there's a lot of rehab that goes into, I guess, losing a big part of your identity and how you redefine yourself, because it is about when the loss is that big and you can't go back to doing what you were doing previously. There's a grief period, and then there's an adjustment period where you have to go, okay, how do I now redefine myself? I can't be the person I used to be, but who do I want to be now?
I like how you use the word rehab as well, because like rehabbing, we all know rehabbing the body for injuries, but like rehabbing the mind is a really
just like therapy is like a gym for your brain.
It really is, and it's just as
so
much
important.
a 3 steps forward, 5 steps back process
as
it is with physical
True.
injuries as well.
True.
Yeah, like isn't it funny how we've just, as a culture in general, or society, just disregarded our brain as a muscle. But it's like so important. It drives everything we are, but
literally,
it also really impacts the physical body.
Yeah.
You know, when you look at chronic pain, I don't know if have you guys done an episode on like chronic pain or anything like that?
No, we haven't.
Oh, that'd be an interesting topic.
Yeah, I'm writing that down.
Have you read the book? The zebra with the stripes or something?
No. How does the zebra change his stripes or something?
No, it's why zebras don't get. Oh, why zebras don't get ulcers. Sorry, it's got nothing to do with stripes. No, it's a book about.
That's one for the book.
It's a book about chronic pain, I'm pretty sure. Anyway, it's super, super scientific-y. And as you can tell by that word that I just made up, I just struggled to read it. But it was very, very interesting. It showed a lot of links between like physical health things and diseases, chronic injuries, chronic conditions, and your mental state and whatnot. It was very, very. It's got nothing to do with zebras or ulcers, but yeah, it's interesting. Anyway.
I mean, like in my experience, when I have been through depression, man, I want to exercise, or I exercise to compensate, to be highly functional, to make sure everything looked okay. So like it's so important, but it just depends what zone you're in. It's really, really hard to actually motivate yourself. Yeah. We've gone a bit off topic here.
We have. Going back to your question, Renee, about like rebuilding your identity, or I guess how do you I guess make sure that there are things in place that you don't it doesn't ruin your life, I guess.
Yes.
And I think for me, it's about making sure that you're not fused too strongly to any one part of your identity. You know, so for example, if you lost pole, Renee, I know like you have so many other things that define you. You know, you've got travel, you've got lots of outdoors things that you love to do. You've got a social science degree, you know, you've got a lot of things that would, I guess, buffer you from that loss. You would still experience grief and depression, but there's other aspects of your personality that you're quite strongly like identify with that would help bring you through, I guess, if that makes sense. Yeah.
I'm like, I'm screwed.
No, you're not.
I love pole.
Or you rediscover other parts of your identity.
And look, I've been through an identity change, and I remember going through that and being told, like, your change right now is the whole reason I'm going to go there. My previous marriage broke down. He's like, you're changing, and your change is why we can't, like, this is a problem because of your change. It's like, actually, is it? Like, I'm gonna let it grow. Growth's okay. And I think that's, as a society, we don't allow failures to happen. Yeah. And like TikTok, Instagram, social media, like we're so quick to jump on the hate bandwagon with somebody. And it's okay to fail. And I think we really fail to see that.
Or
and
people trying to do something different, people trying to go against the grain or whatever, or just do something for themselves. There's always jealousy involved. There's always, judgment.
And I think when coming back to identities, how many people identify as a perfectionist?
Not me. I think that's something that saves me from anxiety, that I've never once ever thought I was perfect. Yeah. So I never strive to be.
Yeah, but there's so many people out there.
Me too. At uni, I was like, like a pass is a pass. Like,
same. Please get the degrees.
I will take it. Yeah, I like it.
I was like that until I realized I could get a pass, and then I'm like, now I want a distinction.
But it also, again, comes back to what pressures were put on you as a young person.
My grades were very rampant. Like that was a very hot topic in my
for
me in my household. Yeah,
I think perfectionism and anxiety go hand in hand. Like people who were always criticized will always strive to be perfect, or the people who were also held on like that perfection pedestal. They don't want to fall back down off that pedestal. So yeah, it is a tough one. I think people don't also, if they're comfortable with who you are, they might not like the shift in your identity, and they might try and hold you back, or they might, you know, not be ready to grow with you, or you might be growing in opposite directions, and that can be really hard too, because all of a sudden you've got two choices there. You can keep pursuing that identity and that person that you want to be, or you can hold yourself back to make the people around you happy. And that's a tough choice, because we value our relationships and, you know, the things around us. So,
and sometimes you've been friends for someone, or again, if it's a relationship there for many years, and then it's kind of like, well, then what am I without that person, and like that friendship or that relationship? So I guess what I'm hearing is like almost like a bit of a conflict between two identity, like separate identity.
I was really worried about this actually when I left Pole, because many of my really strong friendships were so ingrained in my Pole world and my Pole identity, and I was really worried about the impact it was going to have on some of my friendships. But I've been really blessed.
Yeah.
I think like that's another thing as well, is like really make sure you invest in the right people, because it hasn't really impacted any of the really important ones
That's
like,
good.
at all. Like at all.
And that was one of my biggest fears when I was trying to make the decision, because I'd built some really awesome friendships. And when I was on the fence about whether or not I stay in Pole or I leave Pole, it's like, what's going to happen to that? Because like I know leaving school, I have one of those, and that's because I end up working with a girl afterwards. You know, leaving workplaces. Like,
well, you experience it all, going through workplaces, and you have like a work bestie. You see them every day. Like work is like, especially if you're there full time, it's like it's such a huge part of your life. I know that I probably experienced something a little similar. Going like taking, like I was teaching 2 nights at one studio, and then I reduced that right down and ended up sort of not teaching there for a bit. And one of my biggest things was like, I have some really great friends. I have a great time. Like I don't really want to go, because it's like, well, what's going to happen? Am I not going to see these people again? Like all the students that were there that I've known for so many years, like that's, you know, the studio I first started at. So it's like, what's going to happen there? And I think that was kind of at the back of my mind, but not even realizing. And then it's sort of kind of like, you're like, when it happens, you're like, oh, it's actually not the ones that matter, and the ones that like you have built strong friendships with.
I think it's about having the confidence as well to be able to make those decisions and trust that the right people will stick around.
Yes.
And trust in the bonds that you've made.
Yeah.
Because there will be some people that are only Pole friends or are only work friends. And you can't always distinguish it at the time, because they're such a big part of your life. But it's always very humbling when you step away, like which ones stick around and which ones.
And this, I think, will be a really helpful episode for those students that have been at a studio for so long and then have had to move away. We have, and we're quite lucky, I guess, or fortunate that we do offer Zoom options for some classes, and we do have students that come in, you know, dial in or whatever you sort of call it, from quite a distance away, and can kind of keep some of that connection.
Yeah, we had one who moved up north, and she came down and visited over Christmas, and she was just like, thank you so much for doing Zoom. Like it just helped me through that transition, because as you know, going to somewhere where and
she goes to another studio
now,
but she still does, I think, online privates and still does the Zoom classes and stuff like that with our studio. But yeah, just like students moving, or, you know, because obviously life happens and nothing is permanent. Like you can't just you're not just going to stay in one place forever. Some people might, but it's like their partner gets a job away, they need to move. Then it's like, oh, what am I going to do? This is going to like change my whole life.
And it does.
But it's about adaptability.
Sometimes it does change your whole life, but I think sometimes it's not, like the thing you have to remember is it's not always a bad thing.
No.
You know, sometimes you're moving on to bigger and better things, but I think sometimes for some people the anxiety kicks in, and they're almost like, you know, the better the devil I know type thing. Like I was talking to one of my clients this week, and she's in such a toxic workplace. Like she's getting bullied. Like there's all this horrible stuff going on for her, but she's so petrified about the idea of having to interview for another job that she just won't leave. And I'm like, oh gosh, she's so trapped by that, you know, that anxiety and that avoidance. But
we were talking about in a previous episode, like pole dancers like to represent as well.
Yeah.
And so it can be very hard, like, leaving to a new studio where you don't know, like, you've built these friendships, especially if you've been at a studio from like when you started, and you've sort of built that up, because we do like to represent it. We're like, this is my studio and this is my identity, I guess. So
it took me a while to leave my first studio. I was like 1 foot out. I'm like, I'm too scared to like completely detach here. I'm going to go see
because they
what this
gave
other
me
one's
so
like.
much.
Yeah. And it's my safe space, right? But we did have a question around, because we're talking a lot about identities and leaving the identities, but we had a question around like, when can you start identifying as a pole dancer?
Yeah, this was a very interesting question.
It was, yeah. So, yeah, it's so, because one of the examples the person used was, to contrast, if I played in a beginner adult soccer league, I don't think I'd refer or identify as a soccer player. And like, I think when we look at pole, there's so many different levels, you know, there's a social pole, there's a competitive pole, there's a professional pole, there's the instructors or whatever. Like, there's a lot of layers there. So at what point, and I feel like I know the answer to this, but like, at what point can you start identifying as a pole dancer? Like, is there a rule to this?
Well, I think it depends who you ask. For me, I'm like, there's no rules.
Yeah.
Like, the first day you walk in there, and if you love it, you're like a pole dancer.
Yeah, well,
or as soon as it becomes regular, you know, once you've done a term and you're attending weekly, like, yeah, you're a pole dancer. That's the sport you do. That's what you do. But I do know that in some sports, like aerials, for example, they're very particular about who can call themselves an aerial artist. Because I know, I can't remember who it was, but someone's daughter was doing aerials, and she put on her social medias that she was an aerial artist, and her studio was an uproar that she's not experienced enough. She doesn't have the right, you know, I guess, competitive backing or resume to be calling herself an aerial artist. But I've never heard anyone in the pole industry refer to that kind of thing.
I guess it's really depending on how people define the terms.
Yes.
Because like, when you think about it, if someone's a professional soccer player, they're getting paid to play soccer. If someone's a professional pole dancer, they compete in a professional division in pole. Yeah. If you're an instructor, you get paid to
be an instructor.
teach.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I guess it's definitely around the definitions. And I think for aerial artist, maybe it's like some sort of status, like performing, I don't know, gigs paid. I don't know. That's really interesting.
Like, and what, like, I guess when I think about it in pole, like, my initial thoughts are, it's depends on the person and how they feel. But when I think about, like, when can you start calling yourself a competitor? I did one competition and I'm never going to do another one, but now I'm a competitive pole dancer. Like, to me, that doesn't align. Like, but if you do one term of pole and you're going to commit and you're going to stay and do more, I'm like, yeah, call yourself a pole dancer.
I guess it sounds like with those words that you're saying that there's some sort of ongoing thing there. So when you're a competitive pole dancer, like, it's
You've
not
got a commitment.
It's a commitment. It's something, sounds like something in the future, or you know, I don't know.
I never identified as a pole dancer, which is weird to say. I've only really thought about it since you sent me this question, but I was an instructor. I was very heavily involved in my studio. I did pole for a good 5 or 6 years, but I don't think I ever once said to someone I'm a pole dancer. I think I would refer to it as something I did. Like, I do pole, or I'm a pole instructor, or I've done some pole competitions, or I'm a competitive pole dancer.
Yeah, I say that I've done pole competitions.
Yeah, I've done
before.
pole competitively, but I mean, that doesn't even really relate for me. I did one pole competition and then injured myself. But yeah, I never. I think this as well. It definitely comes down to how you define pole dancer, because I just stayed away from the term pole dancer because I was like, can I even call myself a pole dancer? Is that a stripper term?
Yeah.
Like, does that even relate to me? So I think I always just referred to it as something I did.
What will other people think outside the pole world? How will they interpret it? It's always up to interpretation.
Yeah. It is, and I think it's interesting because now I'm reflecting back on mine, and I spoke quite openly about pole, but I don't know if I ever really started calling myself a pole dancer until I brought the business. And the only thing I can think, oh no, I probably have. Like, I'd probably be like, I'll trust the pole dancer to have like that thought or something, like in a group social
I was going to
setting.
say, if you're the only one, I feel like if I was the only one, in a group, I'd be like, yeah, I'm a pole dancer. Whereas when you with a bunch of friends that are all pole dancers, you're not a pole dancer. Everyone's a pole dancer.
Yeah.
So it's like
you don't need to make that differentiation.
it's weird, isn't it?
It's funny. Like I've only just now, like I haven't poled for a good 3 years. I'm going to say.
Why has it been that long?
Yeah, well, I think I was still very much involved up until I had Sophie, but I wasn't really doing much when I was pregnant. So I'd say 3 years. But it's only just been recently that I've really stopped referring to that part of my identity at all. Like I even like over the last 2 years, I would still tell people like, oh yeah,
yeah.
No, I don't say I'm a pole dancer, but like, I was a pole dancer, or I did pole for ages, or that's my thing.
But I would say,
but it's not really.
I'd say I would just say Mon, a fellow pole dancer. Like that's how I see you.
Yeah.
But in all fairness, I don't really do that much pole anymore,
but then then who knows what you do and what you don't.
Myself pole dancer.
Who knows what you do and don't do? Like for all I know, you could be doing classes and but just not posting about nobody really knows.
Just take a picture on a pole once a month, post on Instagram. You're a pole dancer.
Yeah.
Official uncovered definition of pole dancer.
I think the biggest thing is with this question, I guess, is it sounds like this person wants to call themselves a pole dancer and wants to identify as one. So I think that
they've been doing pole for a couple of years too.
Well, then, I think then definitely you're definitely a pole dancer. Whether you I guess your own mindset around if that means you compete or teach or whatnot, but you do.
Well, I should probably elaborate. They do it for fun. They've never done a competition, don't plan on becoming an instructor, and I focus more on the fitness aspect than the dance aspect. See, that's another thing. Are you a pole fitnesser? But like that is for some pole dancers in the industry, the dance and the fitness, it's very important which one you lay down. Back to your point before, Mon, it's like, can I even refer to myself as a dancer?
Yeah, because it's a controversial topic.
It is.
Well.
That's true.
I know some pole dancers that refer to themselves as dancers. They just use the term dancer.
Yeah.
Because, pole does involve a lot more than just dancing on a pole. There's people are really into handstands at the moment. It's handstand February. There's acro, there's doubles, there's just pure dance. Like
that's so true.
There's so many aspects.
I would never call myself a dancer because I've never done I just don't feel like I do like lots of dancing with a pole and but I wouldn't call myself a dancer just because I guess I don't. Maybe that's my own thoughts or feelings about how I feel about my own dance and my style and how I perceive dancers to be.
But I see you as a very strength-based pole dancer. Like you're very focused on tricks and dynamic movements and strength, and you have beautiful dance movements that come with that. But whereas there's other people in the pole industry that I know, they are all about the dance. Like if there was no dance aspect to it, they would be lost.
Yes.
Again, it's just, I don't think you have to identify in any particular way, but if you feel like calling yourself a pole dancer, I don't think there's any hard and fast rules that I know of in the industry.
No. Yeah. And the only thing that I'm really aware of is obviously the exotic and the stuff that happened with that early last year. Yeah. So that would be the only term I would probably recommend reading or investigating if you want to refer to yourself as an exotic dancer and how you would use that word. However, I don't think it is. I think it depends on the type of studio you're a part of. If you're going to a studio that's hardcore pole sports and pole sports only, you might have a different term of which you want to relate to.
I know some girls that only refer to it as pole fitness because that's how they want it. That's what they identify with and that's how they want it. And then there's other girls who are very much like, we want to involve all aspects of pole and we appreciate everything. And, so yeah, I think for me, my instant reaction to that was whenever you want.
Yeah.
If you identify
I would agree,
with it.
like rereading it now. And I think especially during a couple of years, if you feel like it's a big part of your, how much of part of your life is it too? Like if it's a big part of your life, you might want to start using that reference. Depends on the people around you too. But I think it also comes down to going all the way back to what you said with your identity. It's like, how were you brought up and what was told to you when you were growing up, these might influence how quickly you jump to giving yourself a label in the space.
I think the reason I never really referred to myself as a pole dancer is exactly that. I don't like to have anyone label. Like there are people that see that side of my identity. There are people that see the other side of my identity. And I think similar to what I was talking about with you before, Renee, with having lots of parts of your identity that are very strong. That's what kind of really saved me when I quit pole, is that I had really strong aspects of my personality and my identity that I could then move on to. But I also don't just refer to myself as a counsellor, or I don't just refer to myself as a mum, where I know heaps of mums that that's all they identify with is I'm just a mum. And I'm like, well, what else though? You know, so for me, I'm very careful with labeling myself in any one way, because I've learnt that lesson from leaving pole. I don't really like labels in general, to be honest. Even in therapy, like if someone tells me I've got this diagnosis or that diagnosis, I'm like, yeah, it's just a label. Like doesn't really change. It changes slightly maybe how I work with you depending on what that label is. But ultimately,
But it's your behaviours that you display that create and make up that label, right?
Totally.
And we were talking about this off air just before. It's like when you're starting to quit smoking or drinking or whatever, it's like they recommend, when like from a mindset comes into this, right? They recommend, oh no, instead of saying I'm trying to quit, it's I don't smoke anymore. Like you really got
not even anymore. Just I'm a non-smoker.
I don't smoke. Yeah, you really.
That's so interesting. I literally had something come up in my feed about that.
I really like that, and I think I can't even remember where I read that, but that was like and to do with anything.
Yeah, like if you're trying to change a behavior, like quitting smoking. And it's like person A and person B get offered a cigarette. Person A says, "Oh, I'm trying to quit." Yeah. Person B says, "I'm a non-smoker." Yeah. Then the person who identifies as a non-smoker is going to be, you know, it's the same as if you're wanting to change your fitness habits, you know, or.
I did that as well when a couple years ago, maybe it's been 2 years, I wanted to like just not eat like as much fast food, and I wanted to stop eating like McDonald's, Hungry Jack's, KFC was like the three main ones just because they're the big brands. And I haven't had any of that for like, 2 years or whenever I sort of first made that sort of decision myself. And when people are like, oh, do you want to go to McDonald's? I'm like, oh, I don't eat McDonald's. Yeah. Like, and then for that, for me, like there was a couple times where I craved it, and like KFC smells so friggin' good. And God. I remember the taste. But I'm just like, I don't eat KFC. I don't eat that. And I've eaten so much of it in my life before, but that was just a decision I wanted to make. I still have other fast food stuff. So it's not like I don't eat fast food, but it was just a mindset thing for me, and it made it so easy because I just had wanted to make that decision. Yeah. And ever since then, like I haven't had anything from there. I almost caved actually the other day and got an ice cream because I really wanted an ice cream. And then I was just like, it's just an ice cream. Like you can do it. And then I was just like,
and I think sometimes the fear of losing that identity can also keep you on track.
Yes. That's what I thought. But my mindset went from, oh no, but then I can't, like then that whole.
What if someone sees me eating KFC?
Progress and then they said, you said you don't eat KFC. But then I'm like, but also again, that's not my identity. If I want to eat it, I'm going to eat it. So I said to myself, okay, go get an ice cream. And then I was like, oh, actually, nah, I'm not going to get it. Yeah. So it's like, it's definitely.
I got accidentally labelled as the fit chick at work because I like must have been just a couple of times in a row I ordered a salad when we were at lunch or something, and everyone was like, God, you're so healthy, Mon. Like you're the healthiest one here. So all of a sudden I was like, I'm the healthy one. So like all my decisions were like, whenever I went out for lunch at work, I was always making the healthy choice. And I was always ordering a water and I was ordering a salad. I'm like, because these people think I'm really healthy. But I embraced it because I was like, that's a good identity. Yeah. Like that's a good one to have. So I just kind of ran with it.
That's true. And how it can help your habits. I also got labelled the healthy one just because I had a smoothie. I'm like, you guys have no idea what's in this smoothie. It could be syrup.
Told me that story before, I think.
It could be syrup, and everyone's just like, and I'm like, do you not see the chocolate that I eat? But people remember one thing or two things, and then they're like, you're that person, you do that, you go to the gym or you're outside. Like that's
I remember an ex-boyfriend's mum once, I must have like not eaten meat the first time I went there for dinner. And then she just thought I was a vegetarian. Every time I went there, she was like, you're a vegetarian. And I'm like, I'm not. She's like, okay. And then she just like
every time
in her mind, she's like, no, you're a vegetarian.
Because that's because you can also associate people with like an identity that you give them.
Totally.
I guess is like, oh, that's the person that does this or doesn't do that, or there's so much to it.
Yeah, I think people are, I don't know why, but people are really afraid of being labelled as fake.
Yeah.
So sometimes you might even find that if someone else has an idea of who you are, you'll just behave that way to keep them comfortable because you don't want to appear fake, or you don't want to appear like you're doing something against what you are perceived to be. And
when someone thinks so long about you in a certain way, and then if you don't act in that way, and then they're like, oh, like, but you're this, like, they get confused, and then you're like, anxious about it because you're like, this person thinks I'm that.
People like to put you in a box.
Yes.
That makes sense to them in their world. And sometimes
we should all just do random shit just to throw stuff off, like throw people off. Everyone knows I hate spiders. Maybe I should just like get a pet spider.
I hate spiders as well.
Like that's going to be a disaster.
It would be. I'm like, Steph, I'm great. Come over here right now.
Come get this spider. But I think in a cage.
Even in Pole, like I was thinking about the other day how we label non-polars as muggles.
Yeah.
And how, you know, it makes us feel quite special.
But I guess that's when you're in the community, they're the muggles. But then when you're out of that, like when you're with like your normal friends and family or whatever, then they're not muggles anymore. Like they're just...
Yeah, I think it depends on who you speak to. I think some people still like my muggle friends. And even when they're with their muggle friends taking a photo, they always have to be doing the split. I can't take a pole dancer anywhere. All of a sudden, you're allowed to do a split in every photo because you're a pole dancer.
Yes.
Wow, yes.
Isn't it so funny? Like that is something that so many people listening are going to be like, there's that happens, or I do that.
Yeah.
But like, why is this drawn back into our identities? Like super interesting.
Because it gives you permission. It gives you permission to do the things you want to do. So you identify
sexy,
with it.
Wear the heels, do the dance, do the body rolls. Like I know since being a pole dancer, I'm way more comfortable dancing on an empty dance floor than I ever was.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Before, like I was like, who fucking cares?
I'm like, get me up on that stage, even though I actually don't really love performing at pole, but like at the club, I'm like, I don't want to be amongst all these people.
Muggles. I don't want to be with these muggles. I'm a pole dancer.
Like,
get me on that stage.
Get me on a stage. And so I just have more space, and I'm just like,
I remember when we went on our one of our first like big brand Christmas party, and I think it was it was the second one, and it was the male strip club.
I wasn't there.
Oh, you weren't there. Were you?
No.
And somebody got up, I won't label them out in this thing, got up and it's like, I'll show you how to do it. Like dropping the splits, doing some fish flops. Like, I think she may have actually kicked somebody in the face. But like a bunch of pole dancers in that environment, like a male strip club.
And you know what? Sometimes it's really obnoxious.
Yeah.
It's really, to non-pole people, it's like, polars.
Well, I guess that's another aspect of like what happens when you're then around a bunch of other people who also identify. Like I'm thinking of like males. Like you get a whole bunch of males together that like are all into the same thing, and then they just feed each other, and they're just at this next level. That's like pole dancers. You go out with a group of 10 pole dancers, and guarantee there'll be street polling. They'll be doing this. They'll be doing all that sort of stuff.
What happened at your birthday, Renee?
What one?
Last year.
The yacht club. Yeah, like that. Exactly. That's a perfect example. I wasn't too bad, but there was splits. There were splits.
But you know what? Like, who cares? Like, I love that it gives people permission to do the things they want to do. Like, just don't let your identity hold you back.
No.
Yes.
You know, use it to fuel the things you like and the things that you enjoy, and to bring you, I guess, confidence and stability. But also don't feel trapped by it.
Yeah.
Because that's when it gets negative.
And I think if you're living to your true values, your identity is just going to feel natural, and it's going to feel okay. Totally. But before we wrap this up, what are some myths?
Oh, yeah, I have got some myths.
I know. I'm excited for this. Give us some identity.
This actually plays straight into that point you were just making, because the point that I've written here is that you don't have to be defined by any one thing or person or event.
Perfect.
You can choose the person you want to be and the things that you want to do and the behaviors you want to display. And myth number one is you are defined by what you do. So this person thinks that if they aren't on top or if they aren't perfect, at what they do, then they aren't worth anything.
I'm reading a book called Mindset at the moment, and it talks all about this stuff. It's great.
Yeah.
I like that.
Myth number 2 is you are defined by what you look like. And these are people who look in the mirror and decide that if they're not the best looking person in the room, then they're not worth anything.
Yeah.
What's really interesting too is we all tend to have this like mirror face. Like when we look in the mirror,
I have one of those.
Yeah, we do this face. Yeah, we do this face to make ourselves, because that we want to seem more attractive when we look at ourselves. So,
and it's funny, like different people. Me and my friend Sarah were having this discussion, literally this week, and all the things that she loves most about me. And then all the things that I love most about her, we're constantly looking at each other thinking, God, I wish I looked like that. Yeah. And like not even realizing how much the other person is looking back and going, oh God, she's so beautiful, or she's so sexy, or, you know. And it was a really eye-opening conversation because, I just had no idea. Here's me constantly thinking she's the pretty one in the friendship. And she's like, no, you're the sexy one in the friendship. And now I'm like, we're both beautiful. All right, so the myth number 3 is you are defined by who you know. So these are the people pleasers, the ones that like to be part of a certain group or be associated with a certain crowd. They base their identity on the number of friends they have or how well they're known in their social circles. And number 4 is people who are defined by what they have done. They'll believe they will never be worth anything because they've messed up in the past. So these are the people get, I guess, held back by past mistakes or negative identities that they've formed young, and they can't escape those because they feel like they're defined by those mistakes or they're defined by those identities. So it's important, I think, to recognize and realize that you can shift and change your identity, and you're never defined by the way you look or what you've done or who you know, but by how you treat people and how you make people feel. And as long as you're living, like Steph said,
sorry,
close, I guess, to your values, and you're living a life that, makes you feel comfortable, then you're always going to be quite well adjusted.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
And there's something I've read, because I've been doing a lot of diversity reading too. And I think when you said, like, if it's the way you put yourself out there, it's just like kindness, respect, and compassion. Like, we're all different. We all have different experiences. And that's who make us who we are. And that's okay to be different. So is there anything you want to cover off before we wrap this up?
Oh, gosh. I feel
She's
like
can I just give you
I only
guys
got
my
through
notes?
half of my notes.
Well, there'll probably be a part 2 then.
No, I think we covered a lot of it in our little diversions here and there.
Yeah,
and
100%.
I think it all kind of made sense.
If there's anything that we definitely missed, we can check it up on the Instagram page this week.
I'd love to hear if anyone has any questions about identity they want answered.
Is there, and I'm kind of putting you on the spot, but is there like a good resource or a book or something like that you know of that people like to learn more about identity?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of people that I would recommend looking into. Brene Brown is great.
I just gifted Brene Brown's Dare to Lead book today.
Oh, yeah. She talks a lot about... That's awesome. Also, I'm kind of frothing over James Clear at the moment.
Oh, I love
He
James
does a lot
Clear.
on like habits, and he talks a little bit about how identity impacts your habits and things like that. But yeah, there's quite a few things, a few people out there that I think have some really sound things to say. Yeah. When I was quitting smoking, I read.
So funny, I don't
you
like
smoke?
you. Like
Yeah, I
you say
smoke
that
heavily.
Yeah, I used to be a smoker too, and I was like, when you said that, I'm like, wow, just can't picture you as a smoker.
Yeah. What was his name? Someone Carr. Oh, the book that I read, it was all about like exactly what you said.
Yeah.
Like with a non-smoker identity thing. I want to say James, but only because I just mentioned James Clear.
Yeah.
No, someone Carr. It's how to quit smoking or something like that.
Yeah.
So yeah, if you're trying to quit smoking, read that book. So yeah.
Cool.
Awesome. All right, guys. Thanks for delving deep with us on pole identity, and thanks to Mon for bringing us all her knowledge and talking about it. It's a really good topic, and I think a lot of you guys will get some from this. So if you do have any questions, we'll pop a question box up this week and maybe convince Mon to come and answer them for us.
I feel like we didn't touch it on pole much. Did we touch on pole much?
We did talk about pole for quite a bit.
Yeah.
There was a lot of it through there for sure. But it's super interesting just to like I think, bring this topic up and put it out there. So I'm interested to know what you guys think. So come hang out with us at uncovered.pd on Instagram. We're obviously on YouTube as well. We did have a technical difficulty with the videos, and there will be a bit chopped out. But otherwise, come hang out with us wherever you want to, and we will see you next time.